sounds really good. Furious Driving, proud to be supported by Diamond Bright, protecting, cleaning and caring for the Furious fleet and for yours with 10% off using code FD10. Follow the links in the description below. Hello and welcome to Furious Driving, and today I'm at the wheel of basically a unique car, a one of a kind. It's also a little bit of a different direction for the channel today because this is a modified car. We don't often deal with modified cars on Furious Driving, which is a shame because I really like them. However, this is quite special. You know I like a Rover, you know I like an MG Rover car. This is everything. It's a modified MG Rover car. This is an MG ZS 180X. That means it's supercharged. Under the bonnet, on this V6 engine, there's a supercharger. You don't often get to drive one of those. Oh, I could do that all day. I'm sorry, Scott, it's coming back with no petrol. I'm only going to have it for 20 minutes, but I'm going to use an entire tank. By the way, if you like reviews of interesting, unusual, different cars, then please do it, like and subscribe underneath. And look at some of the other back catalogue of weird and wonderful motors we've driven. Now, let's crack on with this particular review. I think we need to do a 0 to 60 test. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 30. 50, 60. That is ridiculous. I mean, that's insane how rapid that car is. This car is. I mean, I've driven a few Rover V6s, KV6s, they don't normally feel like that. The power is just instantaneous. Oh, I love the pop and bang as well. That's real pop and bang, no silly map. Let's do a little bit of a history lesson just here. Where did the ZS come from? It was built between 2001 and 2005 by the new MG Rover company, which, yeah, the Phoenix 4 and all that, came out of the floundering mess of what had been the Rover company when BMW basically abandoned them. And as they were no longer constrained by BMW stopping Rover from building performance models, all their skunk works cars were suddenly able to emerge where they've been doing silly things behind the background. The engineers want to engineer, and they've been working on stuff secretly, quietly, without BMW really giving the authority to go and do it. And Peter Stevens was brought in order to redesign and restyle them and essentially rather kind of staged, grown up, maybe a little old-fashioned, retro-themed Rovers, and give them a bit of a max power kick. So we've got the ZR from the 25, we've got the ZS from the 45, and we've got the ZT from the 75. We did that comparison with my 75 and my friend Batch's ZT at the beginning of the year. I actually really liked it. I prefer the ZT underpinnings with my 75 interior. That would be my ideal car, I think. So that was the new range of Z cars. However, as shiny and new as MG Rover were trying to make them appear, they were basically designed from the old Rover 25, 45. And this was taken from the 45. This is a 45 underneath, just with a frilly dress on. So that's a car that harks back to 1999. However, the 45 was in essence a facelift of the new Mark II 400, which came out in 1995 or 9620 with a saloon or a hatch. So we're already looking at a car that was 6-7 years old by the time MG Rover got their hands on it and started modifying it for tuning. However, the story goes back further. because the Mark II 400 is basically a Honda Domini underneath. Wow, this is good. This really, I'm talking about the history. This thing is just clinging to these roads like crazy. Have to go very fast, just let it get up to the speed limit and just enjoy that insane whine. Oh my goodness. So once it became the 45, there was a couple of different variants of it. There were the K series powered ones, most plentiful probably being the 120, which is the 1.8 K series, making about 120 horsepower. There were also some smaller engine variants with the 1.4. We don't want to talk about that though. And of course there was the L series diesel version, and it kind of goes against the grain to have a plodding old L series diesel in what is the, I'm going to call it the max power version again, because it's got the skirts, the wheels, the lights, all the max power styling cues that you would get at the time. And then give it the chugging frugal diesel. But then back in the early noughties, diesel was king. It was being really sort of pushed for tax purposes, for economy purposes. Everyone drove a diesel. It was the thing to have. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is this one, the 180. And the 180 came with the good engine. This has got the V6, a 2.5 litre V6 in it, making, it's rated around 175-ish horsepower, and they call it the 180 because that's a better number. Same engine as you'll find in the Rover 400 V6, as Hubnut had, and as I drove belonging to Lloyd's Vehicle Consulting a while ago. And I tell you what, with a manual gearbox, it's absolutely transformed, because that car just hung onto the gears so long it was rubbish. Well, not rubbish is harsh, but it was sluggish for a big V6. And the MG range was revamped by Peter Stevens. He was a very, very noted car designer, of course, to turn them from the Rovers into these MGs. But then in 2004 they were revamped again, given a facelift with the new headlights, because before they had the quad headlights and the slightly different grille on the front. 2004 springtime, they got a whole facelift. They got the one-piece headlights, the cross-piece grille, different bumpers front and back. The number plate on the back was moved from the boot lid down onto the bumper. We got different wheels. There's a whole bunch of different things updating the look of it. And that's where we come to this one. This is a Mark II. And this is a super rare Mark II. This car is in a pretty special colour. This is one of Rover's fantastic monogram colours. These are the flip paints, like on TVRs that MG Rover were sticking on cars that made them really, really stand out. This one's called Biomorphic Green. There were only 26 monogram ZS 180s actually built. Not many. And only 6 of them were biomorphic green. Even rarer. And of those, only 4 were ZS 180s, so it'd be rarer still. And of those, only 1 was a Mark II. So this is the only biomorphic green ZS 180 Mark II ever made. And then to make it a little bit more special than that, the owner then did a bit of breathing on the engine. As well as the Genospeed exhaust, the Bilstein and Eibach lowered suspension, the better brakes, this thing's got a supercharger on it. This has got a Sprintex supercharger kit from Australia, which was a thing developed by MG Australia. Oh my word, that noise is just, oh, it's intoxicating and addictive. Let's pull over and have a quick look at that, because it really is something special. So take a look at this colour. I mean, it's not for the shy, retiring type, is it? It is... Hello, dog. I've been dog bombed. It's really not for the... I've been double dog bombed. We'll come back to this in a moment. Hello, you. So as this is the only biomorphic green Mark II ZS 180, this is quite a rare and exciting car. It's also got a few extra little tweaks. The car was redesigned by Peter Stevens and then retweaked again for the Mark II in 2004-05 with different grille, different bumper, new wheels. This car is actually riding a little bit lower on Bilstone and IBAC suspension. It's also got a full Jan speed exhaust. At the back, there is this monstrous, obnoxiously large spoiler. You could choose that as a no-cost option back to the smaller version that was fitted to the 120, but if you're choosing an iridescent snot green metallic car, you're probably not going to go for the less eye-catching option, are you? And this is that new fully wrap-around flush-fitting boot lid, and inside, same boot as before, but this one being max power spec, we've got the big old subwoofer in the back there. Excellent. So we lift the bonnet, and this is what makes this already pretty unusual car even more unusual. I was going to say even more unique, but that's terrible English. It is literally unique. It is the only biomorphic green V6 MG ZS in the world with a supercharger on it, to my knowledge. I'm sure someone in the comments will know differently. But this is a very unusual find to have the KV6 supercharger in the first place. It's an unusual thing. It's made by an Australian company called Sprintex, as it says just here, and it's the Sprintex 2087 model. It's not a huge volume compressor. It's got about a 0.87 litre capacity, which gives it the name, I guess. But as I say, they're hard to find. It was actually sourced from a car that was being converted back to standard, believe it or not. So it's a used one, but thankfully not from a car that was being broken. And it's relatively straightforward, heavy on the ish, because if you take off the original inlet manifold, replace it with this, you have to disconnect the air conditioning. The air conditioning components are still connected, but the pipe is no longer passing through. That can be rerouted, but that takes a little bit more effort. We're running a piggyback ECU to make that thing work, and of course we've got different oil feeds to the thing as well. And ultimately, what happens is you get about 230 horsepower. It's not been rolling roaded, but that is the received wisdom of this installation. And of course, that's quite a bit more power. This was called the MG ZS 180 because that was roughly the horsepower, about 175 in fact. So now we've got about 230. That's several original Minis more. I think that's about an Aygo more power. So this is the bit you want to hear. This is the good stuff, because it doesn't sound like an old KV6 anymore. It sounds totally different. We've got utterly different noise, but it's kind of a rumble from the top end. We've got a bit of a whine on the intake. It's a completely different animal, and that exhaust, that sounds so good. Right, so the car actually belongs to Scott, who's the boss at Discount MG Rover Spares. Makes a wicked cup of tea, hint hint. And you actually fitted this over a course of what? Half a morning?
It was a little bit more than half a morning. It's a bolt-on kit in theory. You do have to make modifications to the car because this was more or less designed for a ZT, not a ZS.
Right, yeah.
So hence the slight bonnet modification, which is temporary.
Okay. We're going to go for the full intake through the bonnet later on.
So there's a local company which we're looking at making a very, very subtle sort of bonnet sort of indent and a grille so we can get some of the more heat out of the engine bay. Yeah. But no, it was I think start to finish it was about 3 or 4 days, just making the wiring good and making sure everything fitted, and you know remarkably you have to adjust a lot of the mechanism on this side to make sure the belt runs straight and it's not putting strain on the bearings. So yeah, and you had to modify the rear cam cover and all sorts. So, but yeah, it's not an especially difficult thing. It's just the kit is incredibly rare.
Yeah. How many are in the country?
Supercharged ZS 180s.
Or the kits in general, or I guess it would be, wouldn't it?
We don't know how many were ever made, because it was an Australian market only kit for the ZT. MG Australia, so it wasn't an MG Rover project, it was MG Australia, so as far as I can recall. Yeah. And they commissioned the kit, and they sold them as sort of like a dealer upgrade. And we don't know how many were made, but a handful of kits did make their way to the UK. MG Rover were messing around with this.
They were thinking about it maybe, or toying with the idea.
Yes, they were, and there's quite a lot of evidence to suggest that a production model was not far away. And then obviously we know what happened, it all folded. But yeah, I know of probably about sort of 6 or 7 ZS's that have this supercharger. I've worked on one of them. In fact, I've worked on 2 of them. So I vaguely knew what I was doing before I went in.
A rough idea what you're getting into. So is it roughly plug? I know you've got a piggyback ECU, but is it roughly plug and play with cables and oil lines? And
yeah, I mean, you have to do a little bit of fabrication work around the back. This has got the MG Australia designed oil feed for the supercharger, which is not ideal. Ideally, you know, the original ones had an oil bath, but what would happen is people didn't service them. And you got leakage through the seals, and then it would run dry, and then they'd blow up, which is what happened to a lot of them. But yeah, there was a little bit of fabrication work to be done. It's not out of the realms of a good hobbyist, or somebody who knows how to wield spanners well. The wiring, you have to understand a wiring diagram, but
that's really the tricky part, I guess.
Yeah, it's again not too bad.
So there are sensors in there going back to the ECU that you've got to.
Yeah, I mean, so you've got the crank sensor pickup, you've got a couple of earths, you've got a live pickup, and and whatnot. But I think there was only sort of 4 or 5, maybe 6 connections out of into the original loom. So the ultimate goal would be to get rid of the piggyback ECU and the 7th injector, which is not ideal.
We didn't mention the 7th injector. There's another fuel injector back here.
There is, yeah. So what that's designed to do is so when you're going up the rev range, it fires and tries to balance out the fuel air ratio to stop it leaning out. And it's semi-successful at doing that. It's not a very good solution.
But if it's a solution, then the best they could do at the time on the budget, I guess.
Yeah, it was. But you know what we'd like to do is go back to a standalone ECU and then down to 6 injectors and then do it sort of properly.
This is bigger injectors maybe or something.
Yeah, I mean the flow rate on these injectors isn't too bad. I'm not going for ultimate power with this. It's more a case in point of this is what I wanted this car to be. You know, loud, it's green, it's got the supercharger, you know, and it's just a fun thing.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the idea.
It is that. It's eye-catching and just brilliant in its own crazy way.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Right. It's back on the road.
Lovely.
Thank you. Now, casting an eye over the interior, you may recall we did a V6 Rover 45 belonging to Mr. Lloyd's Vehicle Consulting a little while ago. Now, this is remarkably similar, but obviously it's been MG-ified to make it a bit more sporty and exciting. So we've got the silver dials now with the MG logo with the chrome rings outside. We've got these kind of knurled rings around the air vents, which have got a nice little chrome ring on there. And instead of a brown wood effect, we've now got this bluey black maple or ash effect, which was so popular back in the 90s. We've also got dual heated seats, air conditioning, which once worked, and this has been upgraded to a period correct Alpine stereo. I do rather like that. This car also has an upgrade to some rather nice leather sports seats, which are extremely comfortable. And we have the leather sports steering wheel. This is the same steering wheel we find in many other Rovers of both R8 and R3 flavour, but we have got the MG Centra. It is a facelifted surround though, so the old logo with the modern satin silver pattern around it. Oh, that rumble! That is just so different from the standard car. Now to drive this thing, it really is so different from the regular car. The power delivery is just instantaneous. There's no lag like with a turbo of this era, and it's incredibly smooth, and the power just keeps on coming and coming and coming. Also, the modifications to the chassis have really transformed it. They've made it something really very special indeed. It's a car that clings to the road. It doesn't bounce and judder and bone shake you to death and lose your fillings kind of thing. It is still soft and pliant enough to use as a daily driver, but at the same time it's got incredible grip and sure-footedness. It just sticks to the road. And I love when you lift off, you get that kind of bum 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 crackle crackle off the exhaust. That whine is just, oh, that's so good. words can't compete with the noise that engine makes. Doesn't matter how good you are at describing things with your words, the sound will always speak better than that. Oh, it's such a shame they didn't put this thing into production, because the power delivery, it's like driving an EV almost. The power's just always there under your foot. No delay, no wait. Just dab your toe and the power is there. It's not like some cars where you push the accelerator, it just gets noisier and nothing really happens. It gets noisier in a good way, but then lots happens. This is my new favourite car. I know Scott spent a lot of time hunting for the perfect car and the perfect kit to make this the perfect car. He did a great job of it. So this is the incredible thing about this car. Not only does it belie the fact that we're now looking at a car which is basically 20 years old off the production line, it's a car that was 10 years old when it went down the production line. This is a 30-year-old car, but the way it drives is so much more impressive than that sounds like it's going to be. My only two complaints with this car are very cosmetic. First of all, the air conditioning no longer works because, well, the pipe got removed, so it physically can't. And secondly, looking out the back window, that enormous wing does make things kind of tricky to see what's behind you. But that really is my only level of complaint with this car. Actually, I'm wrong. I have got a third complaint. I'm upset this never made it into production. Because these should have been everywhere. This really is the definition of a thing being more than the sum of its parts. Sure, it's only an old Rover 400 with some fancy body kit stuff on it, but wow, it feels so good on the road. And that supercharger, wow. Again, wow is literally is the only word. I can't think of a better word than wow. MG ZS X230, one word review, wow. 3 word review, I want one. So basically, I'm going to go home and start hitting eBay for these superchargers, pretty much. Before you start asking me what's happened to the turbo kit for the Tomcat, I decided it was too big for the engine bay and probably didn't have enough finesse in it for the kind of car it is. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this amazing and completely unique MG ZS. If you have, please as always hit like and subscribe, and join us again next time driving something completely different.